All right, so guys, tonight we're talking about depth and if it matters. Let's tee it up by going over a trade. Scott, you're first, man. 12-team Superflex, PPR 1.75 with the tight end start 10. Are you going Marvin Harrison Jr., David Montgomery, and a projected late 25 first, or Justin Jefferson? Go ahead, man.
Ooh, obviously your mind goes directly to Justin Jefferson. Is this a price adequate enough to buy? I mean, listen, if you're just looking for kind of the flex / RB2 production, you're getting it for Montgomery. You've gotten it multiple seasons in a row. He's going to give you 13 to 15 points per game, and he's pretty reliable to get it. Jefferson obviously can give you 20 points per game. So it really comes down to what are you willing to pay for that next tier up of not just asset value, but production. You're getting Marvin Harrison on top of that. Whether you think he's good or not, he's still an asset that others are going to like, and they're probably going to like him even more if he has a pocket of production end of season or early next season, or something happens in the offseason where you go, okay, I can now sell him for 2 firsts on his own, and you're getting a first, and you're getting not Justin Jefferson, but 75% of his production. I think I'm taking the package here because I feel like the way that I play, the plus value side is the package of 3. And I know I'm going to be willing to move any of those pieces. I can immediately put Marvin Harrison and the first on the block, and I may be able to get CeeDee Lamb.
Sure.
I could literally go turn it into something where I go, wait a second, now I got a piece on top of David Montgomery that's equivalent to what I traded away. I think it's too much value on the trio side to not go there.
Shane, it's a 12-team Superflex PPR with the tight end premium start 10. So kind of middle of the road in terms of depth or what we use as our baseline. Are you going Marv, Monty, and a late 25 first, or Justin Jefferson?
I hate agreeing with Scott, but as he was talking through it, it was the last point that I liked. It was, all right, well, what could I do with Marvin at first? Can I get CeeDee Lamb? Can I get A.J. Brown? Well, obviously I can get A.J. Brown right now, but can I get those types of players? It's Monday Night Football while we're recording this. After this, you probably won't be able to get CeeDee Lamb. But yeah, can I get a wide receiver in that range who, well, let's be honest, they're already in Justin Jefferson's range, notwithstanding 130-yard, 2-touchdown receiving days, which, don't happen often. I will take the package. It's not a slam dunk. I'll say that. Like, if I have a team that can sustain giving that up in order to get Jefferson, I don't have a problem with that either, right? And I like Montgomery, and the guy is apparently a touchdown scoring machine for 2 straight years now. He can't be stopped. He will score touchdowns every game he plays, if not 2. But I think I could replace his production. Yeah. In that case, like I said, if I can sustain that loss, I'm fine making that deal to get Jefferson.
If you have saved up a bunch of assets and made a bunch of leverage deals where you build up extra firsts and extra guys like Montgomery, or even guys that are maybe a lower tier than Montgomery, but you're like, man, if I can just play Tony Pollard instead of Montgomery, or DeAndre Swift instead of Montgomery, I don't need 3 of those guys on a roster. I don't need 3 late firsts. Like, that's where you could build up the equity and go, you know what? I'm going to give myself one party in Vegas where I can just splurge and spend whatever I want. And that's what you're doing with this trade. You can't just do this trade on every team, though. There's a lot of teams where I'd look at their roster and I go, you're not in a spot to give up Marvin Harrison, the asset that you spent 103 on, and a first, and David Montgomery, and you're in 5th place. That's probably not the team where you're going, I'm absolutely doing this trade. So I think there is a position, like Shane said, where you would plan to try to buy a player like Jefferson, but it's going to be very specific. If I'm just going, I have no context, I can do more with the trio.
Just for example, real world experience, right? I'm in a normal 12 by 10 type of league, or an exactly 12 by 10 league. And I have 425 firsts, and they're all late. And someone offered me Justin Jefferson for him. I'm not taking that. There's absolutely no way I'm taking that, because my team, for one, isn't in a position where just adding Jefferson is going to make it a prohibitive, good team, let alone a favorite. So it wouldn't make sense in a situation like that, right? But if I can turn a couple of those picks into things, you know what I mean? If I draft a wide receiver and it hits and I can tear off of them and pick up another first, then yeah, sure, down the road. But in a situation where your team's at best, I don't want to say awful, right? It's like the 5. It's like the 5th worst team by record. So it's not so bad
where
that
you don't want to be.
Right. So one player like Justin Jefferson is how you say his his name. One player like that, as much as I love him, is not going to change the fortunes on that team.
So when thinking about this topic, we always look at start 8, start 9, start 10, etc. format-wise, in terms of number of starters you have in your lineup, not including kicker and defense. We always say with the start 8, start 9s, you want to consolidate your depth and get a single hammer, like in the previous trade. But this year, I don't know if it seemed different, but injuries, roster construction was really tested. Scott, let's start with you. You're the roster construction guru. How are you looking at depth for 2025? It's early, but how are you looking at depth for 2025 across different formats, shallow and deep?
Well, I think just looking at 2024's data compared to the past, one thing that's happening this year is there are not a lot of difference-making players this season. There, I believe, is only 3 skill players that are over 20 points per game, and there's only 4 quarterbacks, maybe 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are over 20 points per game if you're just talking standard scoring. But there's a lot of, and it's not just receivers, but even more so running backs. There's a lot of running backs that are crunched in that they're giving me 14 to 17 points per game, maybe a little bit more, but there's not really many league breaking players. I mean, you know who those guys are. It's Joe Mixon, it's Saquon Barkley, it's Jamar Chase, it's Derrick Henry, and Puka Nacua probably after this week is getting close. But like, there's not a lot of receivers and running backs where you're like, that guy is carrying my roster. But what there's a lot of these. And we kind of talked about it with like David Montgomery, like that are him and then a little bit better. There's a lot of those guys. So really the construction this year has been, how many of those guys do I have? And because there's so many of them that are clustered together, people are willing to pay for those guys when they're producing. So if I have numerous guys from that range, which let's be real, it's not that hard to go from irrelevant to 14 points per game. A lot of times you just need some opportunities. You need a good offense. You need to be piggybacked on an offense where you're the second or third target. Somebody like Darnell Mooney, for instance. Like, it's not that hard to get into that range. It's very hard to get into the, I'm putting up 18, 19, 20 plus point per game. You know who those guys are going to be, and there's just not a lot of them. So I think we've taken on this weird market where depth is basically, how does my roster align to whatever the settings are? Even if it's a start 11, if I have a guy on my bench, especially in some of our leagues that are 175, 2 PPR, if I have a couple guys on my bench and I'm like, damn, I'm benching a player like Hunter Henry every week. 1.75, he's given me like 12 to 14 points a game. And I'm pissed because I've missed out on all the weeks where he's been good. Those games where he goes 8 for 90 and a touchdown, he's on my bench, right? But then I'm starting this other receiver that might be scoring a little bit more, but they're interchangeable, and the market will pay a first for the receiver. Hunter Henry's the afterthought on my bench. In that case, I don't care if it's a start 11. I think this is definitely a season where it's proven if we get this happening again in 2025, I want to be the team that has the excess, and I'm willing to lean into the sell because I've noticed in my league, there's a lot more buyers if you're willing to sell from the right range that other people want. I mean, look at a guy like Cade Otton. In a certain format, he pumped up into that range out of nowhere. And there's been dozens and dozens of examples. Cortland Sutton, a guy that people are like, hey, you know what? If I give up the 111 for him and I'm a contender, like there's people doing that. Whereas in years past, no one would have ever paid for those guys because they would have said, oh, dynasty value. They don't have much. So I want to be the team that's willing to sell good players, win them contending. But that's because, especially towards the end of the year, I have a couple guys on my bench where I go, okay, I could play Hunter Henry instead of Jordan Addison. And it's just 40-60 whether I get the higher scoring player that week. But Jordan Addison, people go, man, I'll give you a 26 first for him. Hunter Henry, he's not worth much. No. But really, they're really close together. So I want to be the seller in that circumstance, whether it's a start 8, 9, 10, obviously 11, 12, 13, you're more likely to have buyers because people are like, I want another starter.
Shane, I'm going to throw that to you. Scott brought up something talking about the league economy, league market. I think that's a big part of this, right? In terms of depth, it's what is your access to be able to buy and sell? How active is your market? That does have some determination over your depth. If you need to start with it or if you can kind of just go with the flow along the way. What are your thoughts on this topic though? Depth in 2025. How are you going to play it?
So I'll say this. Yeah, in leagues where the market is strong and there is a lot of movement, because in the past, you couldn't sell certain players, right? Like it would be really hard to sell a Sutton and a Judy and get a first back. Like it was just, so what you would do is in the preseason, prior to the season, you would do your best to sell those players then, right? because or basically whenever you could, but hopefully before the season so you could get those assets. Now I'll feel a lot less inclined or a lot less pressed to make that sale right now. Like I don't have to make that sale right now. And again, it's league specific, but in most of our leagues, like you've seen it left and right. You've seen Judy getting traded this week. You've seen Sutton getting traded, Jacoby Myers, like that range of players going all over the place, and people being more willing to do a second and a Jacoby Myers for a first, because people care less about dynasty value now than they ever have in this game. For some people that have only been playing a couple years, well, they think this is the normal, right? And then you have old people like us who remember when draft picks were held on with, like, you know, the tightest grip you could imagine, like you were doing kegels or something, just kegels on those picks, refusing to let them go. But people, I don't want to say they value the picks less, but I think they are more, it's more the fact that everyone is more, what can you do for me right this second? And I will worry about those picks later because my league is active. And guess what? I think I'll be able to buy those picks again. Now, if you're not able to buy those picks, it probably might change the outlook of what you do, but I have a feeling you probably will be able to buy those picks.
I think we all have felt it this year. We all are in leagues where we're good. Our teams are really good. We have teams full of these types of players. And then you see another manager. I got offered the other day. I was in 4th place, and a manager that was in 3rd offered me a 1st and a 2nd that from a non-playoff team for my Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry's on another tier, but I'm sitting here thinking like, man, they're paying the piper, right? And my brain immediately goes to, I don't want to sell. And I know how many offers, when somebody offers you a 1st for Terry McLaurin, even if it's a late 26 first, you stare at that offer and you go, I really know I should be doing this deal. Yeah. I know I should take this trade, even if it dings me, even if it hurts me against my biggest competitor. All the players in the range Shane was talking about, when you get offered their market price in picks or flexibility, and they're sitting in the David Montgomery, Jerry Jeudy range, immediately you should be going, how can I maneuver my roster to be on the selling side of those players? Because I should be able to find, especially with tools like the Trinity, I should be able to find a guy cheaper where I go, okay, he's not Jerry Jeudy. He doesn't have as good a situation. He doesn't have a quarterback that I like as much, but I can squint and see where this guy could give me what Jerry Jeudy can. And he gives me a similar odds over the last 3 weeks of the season than Jeudy. But if someone's going to give me a 1st for Jeudy and all I have to do is kick back a 3rd or something like that, like I need to put myself in a position to be able to sell there. Because I know it's the pragmatic dynasty move that in 4 weeks, I'm going to be pissed that I don't have that 26 first to throw around. And if I didn't win the title and I'm still holding Jerry Jeudy, the market we know is a fraction of, actually the market won't be a fraction for Jerry Jeudy. The people interested in Jerry Jeudy will be very minimal.
Yeah.
They'll still take him. They'll take him.
Next year.
But until he's back to that, he's a wide receiver 2-3 flex. The demand on him is going to be 0. So you're going to be holding a bunch of those players and you're going to go, okay, cool. My team in the offseason of McLaurin, Sutton, Montgomery, Jeudy, Chase Brown, those guys are great. Yeah. They could run it back next year, but guess how many of them you're going to feel like you're getting the market value to move from now until the start of next year? You're none of them.
0 burger.
So
you know what? That's a good problem sometimes, right? I talked about it on the drive this morning, how there's a specific player. I kept trying to trade literally all last week,
Rachaad White.
And absolutely nobody wanted any parts of him. And then guess what? Bucky Irvin breaks his spine or whatever. He injures his back. His spine's probably not broken. But you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden I'm looking at Rachaad White like, well, if Irvin goes down, Rachaad White could be back in that range of giving me 15 to 24 points a game. So maybe I don't want to move him. So sometimes I think you would be better served if people don't want to buy those players from you, right? It's probably a good idea to have 3 or 4 Jerry Judys on your roster. You don't want 6 or 7 of them because then you have no idea what you're doing and who you're going to pick, and you're going to pick wrong players. But 3 or 4 of them is probably okay. This year going into the season, I tried to get as thin as possible. I want to make one decision. You know what I mean? Like one decision, not all I want to make.
Decisions, right?
Right, and there were some injuries and some players that didn't live up to expectations. Maybe 2 decisions is okay. Maybe I have to rack my brain with 2 decisions. Maybe I put in a little more work and actually look at, I don't know, the things that'll tell me which player I should play. instead of just going, you know what, these dudes are too similar. Let me just get rid of them and not have to make that decision at any point.
All right, if you play Dynasty Football and you haven't already, consider subscribing, hit that like, and check out this video that's about to pop over top of Shane's face. It did quite well, and it could help you out with what we're doing with 2025 draft capital next year.